Committee Room 21. Signed. 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 Committee Room 21, 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 signed. Committee Room 21. 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 Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound.
Members, I would tell myself this too, just remind us to ensure that our mobile phones are switched off at the very least in airplane mode. We do have a quorum, so we're good to go. I'm going to call the meeting to order. So just going to advise anyone in the public gallery that they are welcome to use mobile devices as long as they are in airplane mode, and that all devices are muted, and it is not permitted to take photographs or record any of the meeting. So I'm just going to ask for any declarations of interest from members in regard to any new items that they want to declare, not declared at their first meeting, that may be relevant to matters under discussion at today's committee meeting. Okay, I'm going to ask members if they're aware of any apologies. As Chair, I have notification that we have Anya Murphy's going to join the meeting via Zoom and then join us in person, and Nicola Brogan is also going to join via Zoom, and I have an apology from Michelle McElveen. Thank you, members. I'm going to look at agenda item 2, which is Chairperson's business. Number 1 is regarding the agricultural bill. We have no evidence session today on that. The UFU declined its invitation and the committee team then endeavoured to fill a slot, but we were unsuccessful. Hence the meeting today gives us a bit of opportunity to be quite focused with our departmental officials. You'll be sad to hear with more time with you guys today. But the UFU have supplied a statement in regard to the invitation. The UFU Vegetable and Apple Committee members have signalled the FE scheme, in brackets POs, is not relevant to the size and scale in Northern Ireland and do not see how either of the sectors could fit within the model under the current proposals. It is difficult to get growers to come together in groups. However, the UFU are open to exploring a different approach and are open to having further discussions with DAERA and the ERA Committee in the future to explain further about the support that the vegetable and apple sectors urgently need and how best the provisions within the agricultural bill can tailor their specific needs. As with most new initiatives, if seen to be successful, others would also follow suit in due course. This differs for mushroom industry, however, who do fit the PO model and need the structure with some revisions to the rules. UFU support the mushroom sector on this endeavour. I just want to put my thanks as Chair in regard to UFU's response on that, because I know that it did come late and they obviously were burning the midnight oil on that one, so it's appreciated. Item number 2, members. I refer you to pages 4 to 6 of the table papers for the clerk's memo summarising the informal meeting of the Chair and Deputy Chair had with the Minister and the officials last week. Are members content to note that memo?
Yep.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting on the 16th of January. Refer you to pages 5 to 24 of the pack for the draft minutes dated the 16th of January. Have members any comments, or are you content that the minutes are accurate as drafted? Patsy?
Just one wee addendum on the description of the cross-compliance legislation. I think one of the key issues that I'd mentioned myself is just for inclusion was that of animal welfare as well as the couple of issues that were mentioned there. It's not completely. There may be other issues that the department may want to include in that whenever they're reflecting on it, but just for information, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll pick that up, Patsy. Thank you very much. Are members content that I sign as drafted with the amendment that it will be made for Patsy?
Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 4, or matters arising. Matters arising number 1, I refer you to correspondence from the department dated the 21st of January and Annex A at pages 8 to 14 of the table papers regarding an update on the UK Employment Rights Bill, the abolition of the Gang Master and Labour Abuse Authority. Members, this is an update following the letter from the department dated the 13th of November, which we noted at our meeting on the 19th of November. The letter is in respect to the potential extension to Northern Ireland of provisions in the UK Employment Rights Bill, which would abolish the Gang Master and Labour Abuse Authority, otherwise known as the GLAA, and move its enforcement powers under the Secretary of State for Business and Trade. Members, the Minister has agreed to the extension of these powers to Northern Ireland, which will require a legislative consent motion, LCM, to be brought to the Assembly. It is now understood that the Department for Communities The Department of Finance and the Department of Economy are also within scope of the bill, and the DFC will now be leading on this LCM. So officials are preparing to seek executive agreement to table the LCM. DFE and DOF have confirmed that they intend to seek legislative consent to provisions within the bill and are now inputting to the LCM. As a result, there has been some delay on the timetabling for seeking executive approval. Members, the clauses which Minister Muir agreed are set out with explanation at Annex A. However, the Minister is seeking an amendment as policy and legal analysis of the bill has given rise to concerns that Part 2 of Schedule 4 of the bill confers a power on the Secretary of State to amend relevant labour market legislation set out in Part 1 of Schedule 4. However, currently the bill does not contain any provision to require approval from the NI Executive in the event that the Secretary of State should choose to exercise this function. Minister Muir has indicated that he is content to support the LCM, subject to the bill being amended to address the issue that I have alluded to, thereby giving assurance that this power will not be exercisable in the absence of NI Executive. Therefore, members, the timetabling for the bill remains challenging. It is DFC's intention to seek executive approval of the LCM in late January, with scrutiny by the Committee for Communities in early February and Assembly debate approval of the LCM following on as quickly after that as procedures and scheduling will permit. The bill is expected to complete its passage through Parliament by Easter 2025. So, members, I presume we will be asked by the Committee for Communities to feed into that scrutiny. So I propose that we seek an oral briefing from DAERA officials in due course. And in the meantime, does any member have any comments? Okay, no, thank you, members. Okay, matters rising number 2. I refer to the response from the Farmers for Action NI Farms Group dated the 20th of January at pages 15 to 17 of the table papers. In reply to our letter of the 16th of January, providing them with the opportunity to respond to the DEFRA letter of the January 14th regarding proposed fair dealings regulations. Members, FFA have responded stating that they believe that what DEFRA is proposing is more of the same from the UK Government, citing an example of the previous failures to find supermarkets were failing to pay suppliers on time. FFA state that they do not believe that using the powers in the Agricultural Act 2020 will result in fair dealing for farmers, and that they see nothing in the DEFRA proposals that will solve the financial crisis with farm gate prices in the industry across the UK. They also highlight other factors that they believe means that farmers in Northern Ireland need the FFA proposed NI Farm Welfare Bill to go forward. So, members, I propose that we wait until we have a response from the Minister with regard to his input into the DEFRA fair dealing reviews and the proposed regulations, and then return to this matter for further discussion. Are there any other members have any other points that they want to convey at this point? No? Okay, thank you, members. Okay, agenda item 5 is an oral briefing from the Department on SL1, the Animals Identification Record Movements and Enforcement Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. So I'm going to refer members to pages 26 to 45 of the pack for this item. Members, SL1, the Animals Identification Records Movement and Enforcement Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025, including the explanatory papers. And for accuracy, this agenda item is being recorded by Hansard. Members, last week we agreed to defer this item until this week. The Department intends to make a statutory rule which will ensure that secondary legislation relating to cattle, sheep and goat identification, registration and movement is operable. The SR primarily makes technical changes by updating references to repealed EU instruments in 5 pieces of domestic legislation. The information from the Department states that the SR will be led before the Assembly under the negative procedure, and it was anticipated that it would come into operation on the 22nd of January. However, I presume the officials will clarify a new date in their briefing today. So I am going to welcome the following DAERA officials to brief the committee. We have Neil Gartland, the Director of Animal Health and Welfare Policy, Christopher Andrews, the Deputy Director of Animal Health and Welfare Policy, Darren Fullerton, Head of BVD, Niall Macaulay, Divisional Veterinary Officer. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes I haven't looked up and maybe read it the wrong way. Okay, I'm just going to ask you now to brief the committee, and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning to you, members of the committee. I would like to take this opportunity to brief you on the statutory rule as you've outlined the Animals Identification Records Movement and Enforcement Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. With your permission, I would like to give you and the committee a short overview of the proposed SR. As you mentioned, Chair, I'm joined today by Deputy Director of Animal Health and Welfare Policy Division, Christopher Andrews, Divisional Veterinary Officer for IRM Branch, Niall Macaulay, and Head of Livestock ID, BBD, Darren Fullerton, who along with myself will also seek to answer any questions members may have. You have been provided already with detailed written briefing on the statutory rules, so I'll try and keep my remarks brief. I'll start off with some background as to why the statutory rule is required. European Union law sets out a system for the identification, registration and movement of livestock. This is supported in domestic law by a number of departmental regulations which describe how livestock should be identified, the significant life events that need to be reported to the department to ensure robust farm-to-fork traceability, and the offences and penalties which apply if these rules are not adhered to. However, the EU legislation which previously set these IRM requirements out has been revoked and replaced by the new legislation known as the Animal Health Law. The Animal Health Law is applied from 2021 and is listed in Annex 2 of the Windsor Framework, which automatically applies to Northern Ireland. It's important to emphasise, members, that the Animal Health Law in general does not make many changes to the livestock identification and traceability regime, and nor are there any fundamental changes to processes or procedures for livestock keepers or the Department as a result of the statutory rule. As the Department's domestic livestock identification and movement enforcement legislation currently refers to the repealed EU instruments, it needs to be updated to ensure that it remains to be operable. I will now turn to what this proposed SR does, Chair. This draft statutory rule makes technical amendments to the 5 separate pieces of domestic livestock and movement legislation in relation to cattle, sheep and goats, as detailed in the written briefing. Primarily, these draft regulations update references to the repealed EU instruments by replacing these references with references to the equivalent animal health law provisions. These changes do not represent a change in policy, rather they are technical changes required to ensure that this domestic legislation refers to the correct pieces of parent legislation. This domestic legislation provides for the enforcement of the EU requirements in relation to IRM. It does this by setting out offences and penalties should there be a failure to comply with these identification and movement obligations, such as the requirements to record births on time and notify movements on and off the livestock keeper's holding. It also provides the powers to investigate such non-compliance issues. Remedial action where contraventions occur include the issue of warning letters, the application of movement restrictions, and in the most severe cases only, pursuing prosecutions. There is a need to make these amendments to the existing domestic legislation by way of this SR today to ensure that the Department continues to have a legally enforceable livestock traceability regime. Another change made by the draft SR is to update the details of what is considered to be an approved livestock ID tag to align with the requirements for the new XI prefix tags. Committee members will be aware, Chair, that on the 24th of June 2024, the Department implemented the new prefix of XI and 899, the numerical equivalent on electronic identification devices, which is required to uniquely identify animals from Northern Ireland, and that requirement stems already directly from the AHL. A transition period is in place at this present time to allow the application of UK or XI tags. However, members will be aware that the transition period will end on the 30th of June this year, and after that date, XI tags, as mandated already under the AHL, must be applied. The legislative change within this SR ensures domestic legislation is updated to reflect this change. This will enable enforcement provisions relating to the use of the new XI prefix tags, which would otherwise not be possible without this legislation. For example, where there's a failure to attach approved ear tags within existing legal timescales, where someone removes an approved ear tag from an animal without permission, or where approved ear tags are altered or defaced. There are also a number of other minor changes made by the statutory rule, and these are set out in the written brief. For example, the draft SR extends the timescale for the re-identification of sheep and goats imported from third countries as set out in the Sheep and Goats Records Identification Movement Order 2009. While this was previously 14 days, it has now been extended to 20 days, again in line with the requirements of the AHL. The SR also makes some minor changes to definitions within the domestic IRM legislation to ensure they are consistent across the legislation and again in line with the AHL. For example, the definition of animals is slightly amended to clarify that the offspring of crossings of certain species are within scope of this definition and therefore covered by the requirements within domestic statute. Finally, there are some transitionary provisions when the domestic legislation was originally made that are no longer required, and the draft SR seeks to remove these. As I have noted, the draft SR primarily addresses operability issues within our domestic legislation to ensure that we have fully enforceable livestock traceability regime, including the ability to enforce issues associated with the introduction of the new XI prefix tag. However, since the introduction of AHL, given that our domestic legislation has referred to now repealed EU instruments rather than the equivalents in the animal health law, there has been some legal uncertainty regarding the Department's ability to fully apply the relevant enforcement provisions relating to livestock identification movement. It is very important to note, however, that the legal obligations to correctly and appropriately identify livestock and record their movements as set out in EU legislation has applied at all times to farmers. So while these obligations are contained within EU instruments which are now repealed, they were carried over into the EU Animal Health Law, which directly applies in Northern Ireland. I wish to restate the point I made at the start. The fundamental requirement to identify livestock and report all life events, such as births, deaths and movements, have not changed because of the Animal Health Law. It is just essential that our domestic legislation is updated now to ensure that we can utilise with certainty the same enforcement provisions that we've always used. There are no new enforcement powers being introduced as a result of this SR. While there has been a legal gap with our current enforcement powers, the Department took the decision not to pursue legal prosecutions for breaches of IRM requirements in only the most very severe cases. This is because attempts to prosecute cases where there is operability issues with our domestic legislation would likely potentially be unsuccessful. Also, we did not do targeted on-farm investigations where the purpose of these are to gather information for court action specifically related to IRM contraventions. Nevertheless, it is worth noting that prosecutions are only pursued for serious fraudulent activity in a very small number of cases. The Department has continued to take all possible measures, short of pursuing legal action, in cases where breaches of IRM requirements have been identified. For example, we continue to carry out routine cross-compliance and livestock inspections and applied herd restrictions, issued warning letters where wrongdoing has been confirmed. While we have proceeded with a range of enforcement activities short of prosecution and individual on-farm investigation, in some instances, despite the legal gap until this SR can be made, this has ensured that there has been no known reduction in animal health standards, thereby reducing any risks that could have arisen to public health and food safety. However, as you will appreciate, it is important to correct these operability issues with our domestic legislation and provide legal certainty to the Department's enforcement of existing IRM requirements. This draft SR will do this. Finally, as I said earlier, the draft SR is technical in nature and therefore does not represent any significant policy change. The existing IRM requirements placed on farmers will continue as they currently do. Also, the IRM requirements are derived from EU legislation. There is no scope for the Department to change those requirements and therefore no need to consult, nor are there expected to be any additional cost to industry as a result of this draft SR. The Department did engage with stakeholders in relation to the introduction of the new XI tags last year. The only significant concerns raised were in relation to the length of the transition period, as keepers were concerned that they would be left with stocks of UK tags. However, as announced in August of last year, that transition period was extended to the 30th of June this year. The extension has been welcomed by industry and will mean additional time to use up stocks of UK prefix tags. So thank you for your time today, Chair and members, and I'm happy to take any questions that you or members may have.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. The members have the papers and the legislation read-off in your packs there, guys. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. I'm going to start off then just with a question. So it's evident to see, and it's been even covered today in your speech, that the EU commitments seem to be well covered in the proposals. Can I ask, is there any concern about any impact on the internal market, particularly in around the tags and the XI tags? So you alluded to in the stakeholder feedback, for instance, that maybe it's been addressed that one of the concerns was just the fact that they have the GB tags and no longer can use them.
Yes.
Has it been scoped out then in terms of the GB market, that being that it is the biggest market for our farmers?
Chair, I'll make clear that this SR today just gives us the ability to enforce the new tags. It doesn't mandate the new tags. That's already derived from EU legislation applicable from 2021. Indeed, before that happened, we were already uniquely identified from the rest of the UK anyway, so we always had a different system for identification of livestock. It has no impact on the internal market. Cattle can still move to GB under the new XI regime. There is no difference in that at all. Primarily, the XI 899 was introduced because the EU needed a way to identify Northern Ireland uniquely from the rest of the UK, given the Windsor Framework implications, and also to protect trade from Northern Ireland actually out into the single market, so that we can continue to export PO, WAO and live animals to the south and other EU member states. But in terms of the internal market, no, there's no impact from the XI 899 and animals can still move freely.
There's no system change requirements in terms of that from...
I think, well, Chair, like there have been frustrations expressed because I think, as sort of Neil referenced in his opening remarks, when an animal is moving from GB to Northern Ireland, there is this requirement to re-tag the animal. So if it's got been applied with a UK tag from birth on its holding in England, Scotland or Wales, once it arrives in Northern Ireland, the new herd keeper or new flock keeper will have 20 days then to re-identify the animal with tags issued by DERA, official DERA tags. That is because that particular movement is seen as a movement from a third country into the EU SPS zone, which we still remain part of.
Okay. Obviously, you've alluded to the fact that there hasn't been, I assume, there hasn't been prosecutions under AHL where over this last while, because obviously it's been kind of in abeyance. So is it possible to estimate the impact that either has been missed by failure to be able to do that, and also quantify what will happen if the SR is made and what that will look like?
I'll let the team come in as well, but I would highlight that we took proportionate action with regards to enforcement this entire time, so as to pose no risk to what we perceive to be food safety or the traceability regime. We've always known where every animal should be, and it was always recorded on the system, and we continue to apply restrictions, which would be our normal route of enforcement if contraventions occur. We did look at some numbers before committee session today, and in the year before 2021, when the AHL became applicable and the enforcement powers were questioned, we would have taken around 20 cases to the PPS for non-appliance of IRM legislation. And that's not to say it's 20 people. It could be, we didn't have the numbers of people, it could be 3-4 people with a number of different offences within that overall number. So within those instances, there would have been aspects where we couldn't progress to court action because there was a high chance that legal challenge would have been successful had they challenged any enforcement the department was granted by the court. So as a result, we used what we always did and enforced by way of restriction and warning letters. So if the SR is made today, what it does do is provide us with full legal certainty that where we wish to take cases only in the very most severe instances of non-contravention or contravention of the law, we'll be able to do that again. And also, with regards to the department as a whole, AHL is required, as any EU legislation, to have domestic statute to be able to enforce it as a competent authority. The ASR progresses that back to the department and ensures that we're fully legally compliant on that front also. And
just two last questions from me, if you don't mind, because I'm very interested in this. When we had the session on the cross-compliance issues, it wasn't bottomed out for me, for instance, what the totality of the offences might be. Can someone give us an explanation tonight, or a list, or something reasonably definitive of what would be a contravention that would lead to something moving to PPS? Because I think there's a concern that this is tied to maybe like TB and is animal welfare picked up in this too? Because it would be something that's important to a number of us.
I'll let the team come in, but I'll say that cross-compliance is separate from this. So this is around specific identification, registration and movement offences. So for example, if you didn't register the birth of a calf on time, if you didn't properly apply the ear tag, or the numbers were missing or incorrect, that's the kind of thing we're talking around here, and that's the kind of thing that we didn't take full enforcement to court with, but we did apply all the restrictions in a proportionate manner and continue to do so over the time that we didn't have. Cross-compliance is different. So cross-compliance is obviously a voluntary scheme whereby you have your basic payments for adhering to the rules set out by the department, and if you don't adhere to that, then there is a potential that you'll be inspected by the department, and that would come into either you're fully compliant or you're not. That's a separate area for us, and I don't know if you want to add anything more to that, but that wouldn't be our remit.
Yeah, so formal prosecution and enforcement action tends to come in for just the very, very serious offences, and there's very small numbers. So our officials do not, it's a last resort for us, and it's not the first thing we jump to, and our officials generally try and work with non-compliers to achieve compliance, and it's only for probably mostly the habitual repeat offenders that we tend to bring cases for. Now, where we have identified potential for any repeat offences and habitual offences, we've kept referring those cases up to our welfare enforcement branches, who take the enforcement action, and they will have those in file. Now, obviously, we will not be able to take any action for any offences that may or may not have been committed during this period, but we will investigate. We can still go out and investigate, and evidence-based investigations, and the likelihood is, if they haven't been doing it for years, they'll still not be doing it, and we may still find further evidence. Then in terms of the cross-compliance, as Neil has said, is separate, but it's looking for the same issues in many ways, but every herd practically in Northern Ireland is subject to the cross-compliance regime, because they're almost all claiming that participating voluntarily in this scheme that they receive payment for. And we run so they're all required to report births, deaths, movements, significant life events within a set time period, and to the database. So every year we run like a matrix against the database, looking out for non-compliances, and we list the whole 20,000 cattle herds in order, and we select a proportion of those for inspection. It's likely that anybody who would have been subject to prosecution during this time period would also have been found to have been high up that list, identified for cross-compliance purposes as well.
And this is a bit that intrigues me in this, that I accept that there are two separate regimes, but the instances that will trigger either of them are kind of the same. It could be the ear tag issue, it could be something, and there's probably a read across in some ways. Imagine one single department administering the scheme, but also responsible for the administration of the legal part. So, but I can understand why that's it like that. And the final question from me. I'm interested in this, by the way, genuinely, because I think the farm to fork is really important. One of the things that we stand on in this country is the ability to stand up with the quality and all of the details. I'm eating an awful lot. I'm on a carnivore diet, so the declaration of interest makes William smile when I say that. It does say in the papers that it will not result in significant divergence. Now, when I read that, what it says to me is that some divergence will potentially have been identified. So if it's not significant, what divergence has been estimated?
Chair, in terms of the existing UK traceability regime, the fundamental basics of every single traceability regime are the same, regardless of they're UK, Ireland, Canada, Australia, wherever. You identify an animal, you record the identity of that animal, you request the keepers of that animal to tell you where they are at all times. So the fundamental basics of any farm to fork traceability regime are always the same. In essence, the rules in place in England, Scotland and Wales largely mirror what are in place in Northern Ireland. I think the only obvious differential compared to sort of the past regimes are we now have a different prefix for our animals, and we now have this requirement to re-tag animals when they move from GB to Northern Ireland. That's probably the fundamental, the two sort of real differentials. In terms of what actual difference that makes on the ground to herd keepers, flock keepers, very, very little. Very, very little. I do appreciate there is a bit of probably administration awkwardness around moving animals in from GB to Northern Ireland that wasn't there before. But again, we've been doing this for a number of years, since sort of 2021, and we've managed that particular process quite well.
Would the only region on these islands to not be applying any form of enforcement at the moment?
I would say that to the best of our knowledge, I don't think the competent authorities would inform us if they did have a question over legal advice with their enforcement. Personally, we haven't done that with other jurisdictions because it would call into question, the restrictions that we're possibly putting on at the moment. And I would suggest that, and to make clear that, we would be very much of the view that we maintained farm to fork traceability and the reputation of the industry and the scheme on this, and we were assured that we knew where all animals were. At times the case would arise that if people aren't going to apply the legislation or do something wrong, they would have done it anyway, regardless of the SR or not. But we wanted to ensure that internally within the department we took a proportionate approach to protect the farm to fork traceability regime, and as a result of that, that's why we're here today, then, to fix that, and this SR will hopefully bring back that legal certainty. But the other jurisdictions, I would assume that they would have their legal powers, but that wouldn't be something that we'd discuss possibly with us, and it's not something that I have raised with them either.
Just to underscore earlier points, Chair, the thing that was not occurring was prosecutions through court. They are very much a last resort, as Niall was saying. We were doing all the other things. So herd restrictions were still being put in place. Individual animals were still being put under restriction. Warning letters were still being sent to farmers. We were still undertaking cattle cross compliance or cattle identity inspections. So all those other fundamental parts of a farm to fork traceability regime were still going ahead. What we could not do was take prosecutions to court because we didn't have the underlying legal powers, and therefore the likelihood of those prosecutions succeeding would have been pretty unsure.
So if you're not fully compliant with any element of the traceability scheme that we're aware of, so if you register a calf late, or if there's a discrepancy identified later in its life, or you don't report a movement for it, we manage that through statuses in our database, and those statuses do two functions. They prevent the animal moving farm to farm, so you're not allowed to sell your problems on to somebody else. And when it goes to slaughter, it flags it to both the abattoir and the vet that's present, and all these animals are still all being under the same scrutiny under its different legislation, all the food safety legislation, and that hasn't been affected by this. But these statuses have still continued to be applied and still flag those animals, and then they're subject to extra scrutiny at the point of slaughter. So there's that extra protection has been maintained in the food chain.
Thank you, and thank you, members, for indulging me there just with so many questions. Declan.
Thank you, Chair. See, given the fact that there has been a consultation because these amendments are technical in nature, how then can the department ensure that farmers and vets and other people involved can comply with the updated requirements?
So what we're intending to do here, Declan, is not to make any change from what we had in 2021. There's no new offences or penalties as a result of this SR. So what they should have been doing all along was already obligated by legislation upon them. So even though we didn't have the full power to enforce, they should be doing this regardless. We are working on a wider piece of statutory of legislation for later in the year to look at the animal health law in a broad context, and a couple of changes in penalties and offences are needed around that, and we'll be coming to the committee with that later in the year. This SR is just to bring back the enforcement powers that we already had. So in terms of laying this today, or laying this and making this and coming to you for consideration today, the farmer should see no difference. And they're already well aware of the need, already legally obligated to change tags obviously over to XI. This just means the department has the power to enforce it where there's non-compliance. So on the ground, there shouldn't be much change at all to farmers, vets or anyone else. We will be meeting the Farmers Union and NAPA tomorrow to run them through the detail of this SR and what it's proposed to do. But as I say, on the ground to the farmer, there shouldn't be any difference at all. All this broadly does is bring back the department's legal certainty around our enforcement powers. And there's no need to consult on this because, again, there's no change, there's no policy change, there's no new offences and penalties, and it is genuinely highlighting and supporting the application of animal health law in Northern Ireland, which is a legal obligation on officials to do and ensure that we are, as a competent authority, have the power to enforce that.
And in terms of the one significant change, I suppose, that there is, which is the change to the tag prefix, while there wasn't consultation, there was significant engagement with the Ulster Farmers Union, with the meat industry, with LMC, with the tag suppliers, and with the farm software, with the market operators, everything. So they were well briefed, and they had a lot of time to bring in software changes and that to allow them to adapt to that, and it went very smoothly. And we also took on board, while consultation wasn't appropriate because it's not something we had a choice in, but we took on board and we extended the transition period as a result of feedback received from industry, and I think they were broadly satisfied with how that was implemented in the finish up.
And Neil, you kind of touched on the second question I was going to ask. So are you confident then that there will be no practical changes for farmers' day-to-day operations, for example, in relation to tagging or notification, notification department? There'll be no change in their practical day-to-day operations?
No, this is really an internal mechanism to bring back legal certainty to the enforcement powers of the department. The only change really as a result of this is the 14 to 20 days for sheep and goats imported from third countries, and I don't think that's a lot at the moment. So no, in terms of on the ground farmer interaction with this piece of legislation, there won't be a change. That's why we highlighted in the opening remarks as well, there's no financial penalties or implications for farmers as a result of this SR, nor in the department either. Really what it does is just brings back full legal certainty for us around the enforcement that we're currently undertaking and have done so since 2021, in addition to the very small number of cases that we may wish to pursue once this legislation is made.
Thank you. And thank you. Patsy.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Some has already been answered there in regard to what you might do in instances where there is a persistent or a high-end offender. Now, you may not have this information, but we did talk about the cross-compliance issue there. So, would you have any detail of the numbers of individuals who we'll call them high-end, maybe repeat offenders, for whom there has been a penalty or penalties enforced in regard to cross-compliance? If you had that detail, if you don't have it with you, we can get it again.
Yeah,
it's just to see what action has been taken, if there are people who fall within that category who should have gone to court and couldn't go to court because of, well, the law was redundant, if what other action has been taken against them.
Yeah, well, have a bit of high level details on that without going into specifics in any individual cases or anything like that. For 2023, which was the last year with full figures available, there were we're required to inspect approximately 3%, or at least 3% of all active herds, or all claiming herds, for compliance with these traceability requirements. So over 700 herds were inspected, cattle herds were inspected in 2023, and given that 75% of those were selected on the basis of risk, it's probably not a surprise that there was almost 250 of those penalised out of those 700.
Sorry, maybe you're not hearing me clear enough. Those
the habitual.
Those that initially, under your own criteria, had this legislation been updated in time, those that would have been taken to court, or potentially would have been taken to court, or regarded as offenders who could have criminal action taken against them. Those that you would have identified, and I'm sure you have identified, don't know what the quantity is, but what read across action was taken against them in regard to the cross-compliance penalties which can be enforced as, well, you know that better than me.
So we wouldn't have referred those directly for cross-compliance because we would probably didn't have the legal authority. So when we had the legal powers, if you had suspicions of say, a whistleblower or something like that, you would have taken them. But
sorry, I'm a wee bit confused. You're the same department,
yeah,
and you wouldn't have legal authority. So you spot and identify a case, a high risk or a high-end offender or high-end offence risk case that could potentially wind up in court. And you already have, I'm sure you've spotted or identified a number of those. So are you telling me that another wing of the department doesn't know about that because you, whenever you've spotted it, haven't informed them?
no, it's if there's a potential breach, we would have to go on to the farm to investigate that before these would be what we would call our targeted investigation. So they would all feed into the cross-compliance system, but they would be done by our welfare enforcement branch. So there's two teams, the welfare enforcement branch that do targeted investigations, but they rely on the legal powers from the legislation to go on farm and do those investigations. So without those legal powers, we haven't been able to go on farm and carry out those investigations that almost certainly would have led to cross-compliance breaches. But we have now, I don't have specific figures for who may or may not have been taken forward to enforcement, but there is a very high likelihood that those people will also have been caught in this matrix and be among the sort of top 10 offenders who are getting.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get at, and it doesn't necessarily have to be around animal welfare, as you'll know better than me. So whatever way or by what mechanism you've identified those high-end or high-risk offenders who would have, in that interregnum period, wound up in court by yourselves taking, and you've identified them, you referred to them. So I'm just trying to establish what is the process by which that, once identified by the department, then is referred or highlighted or whatever it is, red light, whatever it is, goes to cross-compliance to ensure that they are aware of it.
These are potential, I suppose, issues of non-compliance, but without the ability to go on farm and investigate, we don't have the hard evidence of that. But the same people are very likely to be notifying animals late and not registering their births in time and not notifying movements and have a high number of animal turnovers in their herd, buying in a lot of stock. They're likely to fall high up that list anyway and be subject. Yes. But we would not actually be penalising them directly for any of the other sort of external, maybe whistleblower evidence or anything like that. It's only then we would go out and inspect them based on the sort of risk matrix. But if we find non-compliances, then they would be subject to a reduction in their cross-compliance penalty up to 100% potentially.
I'm not even talking about whistleblower. I'm talking about those cases, back to this, those cases that would have been caught in that intervening period where you had an emasculated bit of legislation that you couldn't do anything with. You're bound to have identified a number of cases. I'd be shocked and be surprised if that wasn't the case. So I'm trying to establish just if there are 4, 5, 10, 20 or whatever it may be in those cases, what the process is within the department to ensure that once identified, if there is a high risk or high-end potential offender, even though you may have the handcuffs on to take legal action, that there's a process whereby someone else is aware of the risk, the concerns. They may well already be aware of them, but it's just to make sure that there's that proper flow of information within the department itself.
So I think with respect to, obviously, the on-farm investigation we couldn't progress with, but where there is a high-risk offender that we thought would maybe be in a worse off position than what we knew about, but we'd only be able to do an on-farm investigation, we would put a restriction on that farm. We would put, obviously, and take an enforcement action. I would assume, now, again, cross-compliance is another area, but that the restrictions placed upon the farm for our end would have flagged cross-compliance, or it would have been informed the matrix around how that person was selected. I don't know what the matrix is because I know it's a large number of other factors as well, and it is a different side in terms of that I'm sure would fit into it. But what we can do is follow up right with you to that question, if that's okay, because I certainly wouldn't have exact numbers. And in many instances, Patsy agrees, it's hypothetical. We don't know if there'll be an offence on farm until we get onto farm to see, and we can't get on farm. So what you're really asking is around in those instances where we think there is an intelligence-led potential that there was an offence, how did that interact with the cross-compliance? either random selection or 75% targeted selection. And I think that if there was a restriction placed upon that herd, we would have fed that in. That would have been fed in as part of the matrix. But we'll come back to you in writing on the points that you've asked, if that's okay in terms of that point.
So you might sort of be referring to, for prosecution, say a vet or an inspector or an admin person in one of our offices might notice a level of unusual activity, late notifications, animals disappear, and so you go to do a TB test and there's 20 animals not there you'd expect to be there. All that is feeding in to the selection process for the cross-compliance inspections already. It's not that we have to take a separate process, because, we've referred this for prosecution, but we can't take a case and we have to go back to cross-compliance. That's already going directly to cross-compliance as part of the selection process.
I get that. That's just, well, you'll be getting back to us anyway, Neil. Okay, thank you.
Patsy, can I come in just 2 other quick points on that? I think it's also worth noting that any intelligent-led notes the department got from industry or anybody else around somebody having non-compliance, we have that recorded, so that when this SR is made and we have the ability to do on-farm investigation as well, we can follow that up. So while there may not be that compliance may be done and dusted, that non-compliance maybe have been started and gone and we weren't able to get on farm, we do have an overview of intelligence that we could then begin on-farm investigations where in instances we have intelligence to suggest something is not happening the way that it should be. So we have that all recorded, and we would be doing that when we have the powers of the SSR back again. And I also think it's worth to note, in terms of general prosecutions that we did not take, I say around the 20 instances that are sent to the PPS in 2020 broadly, that's not necessarily 20 people, that could be 2, 3, 4 people. And when you look at the amount of convictions that we got specifically for IRM offences, and when I say convictions, that could be a fine, it's only taken in the most severe of cases. You're looking at 3 in 2020, 7 or thereabouts in 2019, and then around 18, 19 in 2017. So they fluctuate, but they're not a huge number when you take into account too many cattle in the country alone, near enough, so that it's not a huge number that we're talking about here, but it just brings back that legal certainty. If that's, and we'll come back to another point, Patsy. Thank you.
Grant, thank you.
Thank you, Patsy. Just fish out 2 small ones in. Patsy's piece was very interesting there. So I think if this has been said, but just to have it repeated, in terms of the practical implications for farmers, I think you've said there are none. Because the regime is exactly the same.
Yes.
It will not change. There's no practical implications for farmers at all, because that will be a concern to them, because farmers are under immense pressure at the minute for a variety of reasons. But thanks, Patsy, for that query. Then we have Williams next, followed by John Blair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And what in essence, as I see it, this is doing is legalising decisions that have already been made. The issue of retagging animals coming in from the UK or the GB has been an issue for registered pedigree producers. Very unhappy. The rationale, this is, as I see it, Europe's insistence that this happened, but is there any other rationale behind this?
So
it doesn't make sense.
Well, I'll try my best to explain it, William. There's always been a provision in Northern Ireland domestic legislation that animals, livestock coming in from a third country must be re-tagged. When the UK chose to leave the EU, in result of obviously the negotiations, GB was reclassified as a third country. So that existing provision then applied to England, Scotland and Wales. So this is not technically a new requirement. The status of GB changed. Once GB became a third country, we had no other obligation or no other option but to apply the legislation. We were advised that by the European Commission. So that meant that animals coming in from England, Scotland and Wales would have to undergo this re-tagging process. Niall and myself and others then worked out a means of making sure that could happen. We did take representations at that time from a number of the pedigree societies. There were a number of individuals who felt that it sort of created difficulties. We worked with our UK colleagues and to a degree it seems we've managed to get a process which largely works. We've not really received any sort of further correspondence or representation in recent times around.
Would accept that very few animals have been imported.
But equally, there's very few animals coming in since Blue Tongue. But even prior to that, I think we'd largely worked out a process where We were able to keep those flow of pedigree animals moving. We were able to have a retagging process which they understood. The information was able to be sort of correlated on flock and herd books belonging to those societies, and any sort of impacts of this requirement were minimised.
I think it's important to say as well that this change of having to re-identify GB imports predates the change to the legislation this required, so that became effective immediately. The end of the transition period was at the beginning of 2020. So the old EU legislation was still applicable at that stage, and as Chris said, all that changed was that now GB animals fell into the bracket of animals that we always had to re-identify. So this legislation doesn't have a direct and immediate impact on that existed prior to this change.
Yeah, but you can understand how Joe Blogs on the ground can't see the logic in this. But I understand where you're coming from. EU's insistence on this was beyond our control, but I mean, it's crazy.
I'd say, William, the debate around the objectives of the legislation, animal health law, or the requirements put on farmers, that can be in the discourse, but this does not impact those obligations. They're already there, regardless of this piece of legislation today. This piece of legislation just gives us the power to enforce non-compliance. That's all it is. So the retagging issue or the XA 899, that won't be impacted by this SR today at all. It just allows us to enforcement of it.
In response, you said there's a small number that went to court. You would accept that most cross-compliance issues are not legally or criminal offences. Most cross-compliance issues are minor offences and are not. There's no legal or criminal offence in a late permit coming in.
I suppose that's why, again, there would be two separate things. A fine or deduction.
But a lot of people don't understand that.
I think that's something we can take away. It's not our area. Cross compliance is a very separate part of the department, but we would only be taking and seek to do prosecutions in the most severe instances of non-compliance with IRM legislation. Yeah. And when you look at broadly the amount of restrictions we would have on any one time, or the amount of cattle we would be restricting at any one time, compared to the amount of prosecution we would take, it's very small. It's only at the very last resort for the most serious issues that we would take the step to try and bring it to court. And in those instances as well, the ultimate sanction sometimes by the court is generally a fine as well. So it isn't. It's a rarely used power, but it is one that we feel that we need in order to give ourselves legal certainty across the board with this.
Okay.
Thank you, William. Mr. John Blair.
Chair, thank you. It's my hope that there will never be differences arising around something as serious as food security. And I think without doubt that the wider public, the people we represent, would expect there to be pretty robust regulation around food security stemming from traceability. For reasons of public health and animal health and reputational reasons, amongst many others. But the question I was going to ask was around numbers and not dissimilar to Patsy's question, but I'm going to return to it. Clarification first of all on, did I hear that there were 200 or 250 out of 700 that required further action? Now, that's the first part of that question. The second part is, I know we probably can't get the figure of how many might have gone to court. Is that because no decision was ever taken to go to court? Because you couldn't take that decision?
You couldn't do the on-farm investigation, so you wouldn't know what you didn't find. You can only. That's why I'm working on the basis of the broad estimate of figures that we did take to court previous to 2021 when we took the proportionate decision to stop prosecution. And that's the only sort of figure I could give you on that, John. The 20, and again that 20 from 2020 or thereabouts is not based on.
So it might be a good guide is that of those 200 or so herds, 6 of them received 100% penalty. So you would expect that might roughly correlate, but we're only speculating with the most serious offenders.
And again, just for my own clarification, is that 200 or 250 out of the 700?
250 were penalised in total, and about 200 had a total penalty of 5% or less. So this is like it's a voluntary scheme. You know, they're not obliged to receive these payments, and by signing up for them, you agree to apply the conditions, which are legal obligations anyway. And so where we're finding any instances of failure to comply with the conditions that you've signed up, you've said you'll do it when you claim these payments. So out of like whatever 20,000 or so herds inspected, 250 penalised, 200 of those 5% or less.
Okay. Pretty significant figures nevertheless, and again reinforcing the need for robust regulation. The second question is purely for clarification and I suppose for the record. We've had it explained to us in some detail, but the inconsistency which arose, or lack of continuity that arose in 2021, so that we're clear, there was no decision taken not to do that or not to do something. It was simply that nothing was done. The decision wasn't taken to do. There wasn't an active decision not to do anything.
So in 2021, with the application of AHL, we had legal advice to say that your legal powers for enforcement would be queried, and there would be a chance of a successful outcome for an appellant if you did get a successful prosecution. So we took the proportionate approach as I've outlined to just simply focus on restrictions, as we would normally do. Within the efforts, the department then recognised it needed to be taken to update the statute book. We did not receive ministerial agreement before October 2022, and thereafter we also were aware at official level that some aspects of this could have been part of the discussions over the Windsor framework, particularly around the XI 899 issue, for example, and how that was all going to be settled. When that came to obviously conclusion, we still were required to apply AHL its entirety. We were working on the background to progress a larger ASR to fully support animal health law IRM requirements in Northern Ireland, and we updated Minister Muir on that. Unfortunately, that has been delayed because of the complexity around that legislation. So Minister Muir took the decision in autumn then to progress this one as quickly as possible to bring the enforcement powers back, give us certainty, and then in the autumn we'll bring for consideration the larger ASR, which will be potentially some new offences and penalties within that, and will be subject to consultation. So that's the timeline of what we did on that. All I can say is we didn't have a decision with regards to what we should do with future legislation as of October 2022, and then we progressed on as officials to draft legislation, conscious that it could be subject to negotiations, and then Minister Muir took the decision in October when imposed to progress with this bridging SR.
Okay, look, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And Thomas Buchanan.
Thank you, Chair, and a lot of the issues have been covered, but I think whenever we strip everything away from this and drill right down into it, what we have here is the dictates of EU that that is making a difference between us and the rest of the United Kingdom, because when we read the notes here, it does say that this doesn't have to be applied throughout the rest of the United Kingdom. So it is making a difference, and it may well you may well talk about it being small technical changes as is making no difference. We've always seen over the years that whenever these things have come and these changes have come, it's only whenever they are in place saying that there is then the farmer on the ground then does see that there is a difference, and it's making a difference for them. And I know John spoke about robust legislation for food security. I tell you, there's no greater place where there's greater food security than there is in Northern Ireland. So there's no fear around that part of it. But it simply seems to be it's just the dictates from Europe saying you must do this because it's going to make a difference between you and the rest of the United Kingdom.
So Tom, in respect of the written briefing, what is not applied in GB is the animal health law itself. So the animal health law itself is applicable here and in the rest of the EU, but here under the Windsor framework it's not applicable in GB, although they may choose to advance certain aspects of it in order for that England, Scotland, Wales trading relationship with the EU. What this SR does is simply brings back the enforcement powers that we had in 2021 before the animal health law even came into effect. It really broadly just does that it gives us the full range of enforcement powers around IRM. It doesn't introduce anything new. Now, what we have done in that intervening period between that application of that larger law and now is taking a proportionate approach that we think and would stand over has continued to ensure the complete protection of our traceability system and regime. But obviously, discussing with you today this SR, it is now known that there was a query over the enforcement powers and our ability to enforce in that time period, which we wouldn't want to then continue on in after today. And that is why, Chair, actually to go back to a question as well, that's why we would look to make and lay the legislation if the committee in its considerations would be minded to agree with us that it needs to be done. But the SR itself doesn't implement anything new from the EU. The animal health law does, which is already here. It's already directly applicable. Farmers still automatically have to do what it says because it's a regulation. And that's separate from what we're here to discuss today. What the ASR does is give us the powers to enforce IRM legislation. Indeed, powers that broadly England, Scotland, Wales' question was asked earlier should have, but that we have a legal question mark over at the minute, and this SR is hoping to resolve that, and that's what we're intending to do. And that's why it's technical in nature. Just to be clear, the animal health law is not applicable in GB. It's not this SR today. This SR today is around enforcement powers.
Yeah, the fundamentals between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK are still the same. For example, our herd keeper will still have to notify a birth in England, Scotland and Wales the same way we do. They will still require to notify movements off their holding in England, Scotland and Wales exactly the same way we do. There are very, very broad parallels. The fundamentals of the farm fork regime, the requirements placed upon herd keepers, flock keepers are broadly identical.
The part of this legislation is part of the high standard and the high standing of our domestic traceability regime, and it's vital, you know. So our third country and internal market and all the rest of it, customers that we're trading with, internal supermarkets, everybody, and the EU as well will require this legislation to be in place. You know, so when they're auditing their meat plants, as they all do, you know, they will be looking for an operable. So it's not just about going out and prosecuting farmers. That's a last resort for them, but it's part of the overall traceability regime is having these powers, and customers will expect to see them.
Gives you powers to enforce. And to come back to what Patsy was getting at, if that legislation had been in place from 2021, which would give you the powers to enforce, how many cases do you estimate you would have had put enforcement on that you weren't able to do because that legislation wasn't in place?
We can only give you an average of what we did before 2021, and that was 20 contraventions of the law a year. Again, as I said, that's not necessarily 20 people. It could be 5-6 people for 20 instances where they didn't do what they should have been doing under our legislation, but I can only give you that figure because it's hypothetical what happened in the time period before. So that's why we discussed this and thought that would be of help to the committee if we could outline that. And in terms of the actual convictions that we got before 2021, it was 3 in 2020, 7 or 8 in 2019, and I think 17, 18 in 2018.
And those 20 wouldn't all necessarily have resulted, you know, they could have been dealt with cautions and conditional discharges and all sorts of legal mechanisms. It wouldn't necessarily always have ended up in a criminal conviction.
Any other questions from the members? I have a couple of, just because obviously this is a very interesting conversation. So picking up on Thomas's point there, so the animal health legislation which was applied from 2021. The IRM is one part of it. It's one part of it. So we could find ourselves at different stages if GB decides to do something slightly different, or EU decide to amend their legislation. We can keep coming back here, which is the risk, I suppose, of that future divergence and the growing divergence. On a much more global scale, and you guys won't be able to have scoped this because we didn't know which president we were getting in the US, or maybe have sight of the EU signing the Mercosur deal. Obviously, this is about trade opportunities to food security. We've got the EU have signed up, obviously, to the Mercosur deal, which is evidently opening the door to a product which won't have this application, I would imagine, or the need for this level of animal health legislation to be applied from South America, and the potential for further trade deals being made now with the new American administration. Is this, to pick up on Thomas's point, just again, just going to say it, and as much as you might not like this, it's a bit of a democratic deficit for this place to be in, that we have no say into the animal health legislation that is made in the EU. And so, I know it's very high level, but it's a reality of it. And if that's the case, I'm not giving you an out here, but I know how this kind of works, and we need to be realistic in how we talk about these things. What's the discussions like with DEFRA and the other devolved regions in terms of their ambition with regard to how close they're going to work with the European legislation, the updated aspects of that? Is there any hint that the Labour government, for instance, is going to take that route?
So I think there's a couple of questions in there.
Yeah,
Chair.
sorry.
No, you're grand. I think with respect to animal health law, it is fair to say it applies here, and it doesn't apply in Great Britain, but ministers could take the decision to apply any aspect of it if they wish. We are under a legal obligation to apply it because of the Windsor Framework. Yes, the European Union could take a decision to update that at any point in time, although they will have to go through their own democratic procedures and processes to ensure that they do that correctly, or indeed if the power is given to the Commission to do it, that will have done through a democratic process as well. And if it is under the Windsor Framework, then it is likely, subject to the democratic mechanisms here that have been agreed, then we may have to apply it, so that is fair. In terms of a democratic deficit at an EU level, I think that's a question not for me. It's a more political question, so I'll not attempt to answer that in any which way. But and then with regards to the trade deal, the Mercosur, I wouldn't be able to give you any information on that because it's not our area at all. We are domestic IRM legislation about movements in and out of Northern Ireland, not necessarily the rationale behind why a country with a lower standard could come in or a country with a higher standard could come in. That would be for greater minds than me probably. So I couldn't come back to you on that. I'm sure that trade colleagues in the department, if we take a note, can come to you on some of the questions that you've given rise to on that as well. And then with regards to advice that would potentially be being issued to UK ministers, I'm not aware of what that advice would be in terms of future relationship. That will be a political decision for them to make. I just bring it back to the obligations placed on us with the Windsor Framework and from the legal advice that we have received as departmental officials, that we have to apply the law as it stands and advise the Minister to do the same with us and assist us in agreeing and progressing on with that, where we don't have a choice. So that's probably where I'm at, Chair. But
yeah, Chair, just on the UK traceability piece, we have regular liaison with our colleagues in England, Scotland and Wales. I think they're very cognizant that Northern Ireland is in a unique position. We are still part of a UK traceability regime. We are also part of an EU traceability regime, and they understand and respect that. Traceability, livestock traceability, is actually devolved to all 4 nations of the UK. So there was always potential that England, Scotland and Wales could do something different or have a slightly different interpretation. But there's a will and a desire to work together to ensure that whatever rules are in place right across the UK, that we have a totally operable and robust UK traceability regime for the purposes of external trade and all that sort of good stuff. So that will to keep working together is there, it exists, and it will persist in the future.
Can I add that as well? Because under what Chris has outlined, completely agree. It's the common frameworks which you'll have considered before and will be in due course again, and that's the mechanism by way of which then formally we can discuss any divergence. And indeed that will be pushed in the last instance if it can't be determined at officials, whatever the question is, if you can't diverge, if you can, or what the impact would be. If there was a serious concern around that would go to an interministerial group then. So those structures are in place, and the common frameworks provide a mechanism to do that across a broad range of areas, animal health and welfare being one, zootech another, and then other common frameworks for other parts of the department, as you and members will be aware.
Yeah, it's actually, for me, it's shaping up into a simple problem with complex issues over here. So
just a quick question. The emphasis has been that you have legal powers to bring farmers to court. I'm aware of a farmer in my constituency was brought to court some months ago. So there still was powers to bring farmers to court?
We have powers to bring farmers to court for non-contravention of the law, for example, around animal health or around welfare and transport, just not on IRM. And indeed, if there has been a court case for IRM, it may have been before 2021 that the events occurred and the process started. We haven't actively taken any prosecutions for IRM offences since 2021 when the legal advice said that our powers to enforce were at risk. And that's partly why we're here today, obviously, to ask for those enforcement powers back for IRM, but also to give us complete legal certainty that the restrictions that we are today currently having on place on farm and continue to do are able to not be challenged, because it is the right thing for the department to do, obviously, and the farmers should have been doing that anyway. That's why the restrictions were put on. But
I think most members of the committee mightn't fully understand. You have still been fully active in cross-compliance inspections throughout this?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. That hasn't been an issue.
No, cross-compliance is different legislation, different regime, completely from again what we do, which is the identification, registration, movement of animals. It's not around payments to farmers. It's not around the ability to enforce a reduction in any payment or any scheme. That has nothing to do with us. We are around farm to fork traceability and enforcing the requirements placed upon farmers here.
Cross-compliance is part of that too.
It is as part of the sustainability standards, but that it is a separate area around finance and a voluntary code that farmers sign up to receive that money. It is different from a legal obligation placed on farmers to do the correct thing to ensure that our traceability regime is robust.
Absolutely, and I'm all on for that. I'm not against that. I think that's very important.
Thank you, William.
Members happy? Well, I'll say anything else to add? Any more questions? You've been well and truly grilled, I think. Thank you for attending, and thank you for taking the questions in the manner that you did in your responses. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, members. Have any members got any other comments that they want to make on the content of the discussions and questions from the department and the department's ambition to take this SR forward? And if that is the case, then it will be the SR will be considered in due course that the department are going to make that, or
we have some concerns about it, given the fact that it's EUC led. We have some concerns about the SR.
Okay. Any other members? Anything that they want to add to that? We need to take a decision as a committee as to whether the committee is content or not.
Chair, we don't need to take a formal vote until the SR comes before us, but if members have strong views that they want fed back to the Minister on it, this is the time to do it.
Yeah.
So it would be useful to get a view of the general support.
Okay, yeah.
The officials to take back, or
we have the officials in front of us, guys. So I'm sure, obviously, you're well aware of the questions that have been made and some of the responses. From my perspective, I can see the need to do it to ensure that we have a regime. But I do have the shared concerns of some members that this is only one part of the animal health law and the future divergence and the sort of global uncertainty in terms of trade, and also I'm just going to be honest, that democratic deficit, that if we don't have a voice in the alteration of animal health law.
Yeah, and I think, Chair, that herein lies a problem, in that we have officials before us today looking about small technical changes that's coming from Europe to do with this here, but there's no guarantee that within 6 months or 12 months that these folk will not be sitting before us again looking for further changes within this that we have no say over, as been dictated to us from Europe, and looking for further changes that the rest of the UK don't have to implement. And therefore that is where the difficulty lies. And that's where the difficulty lies for us.
And I think as a result of the SSR, and that's where I need to be clear, is the powers that we had before 2016, before 2021, and the ability to enforce that, that's exactly what this SR will allow us to continue to do. There isn't anything new apart from that small change with the 14 to 20 days for imports of goats and sheep. It allows us to enforce the new tags that have obviously rolled out. If we don't make this SR, then we are proceeding at risk with any enforcement on any IRM offences in Northern Ireland. We will not be able to take any prosecutions to court and could viably be challenged on the restrictions we have in place. That's the impact of this. It doesn't bring in anything new. And Tom, I hope it's 6 months, but maybe you'll not think the same. But we want to be back with you again in 6 months' time, because there is a larger piece of legislation that we are working on, which will fully support animal health law in Northern Ireland. That will have a number of changes within it. That will be the new things that have been introduced as a result of animal health law. Although we would think there are not many, we will be here to discuss that with you. We will have to go to consultation on that. That will be full part of this committee's consideration. And the rights or wrongs of that obviously is not for me to highlight, because I will be progressing what we are legally mandated to do and what the Minister has asked us to do. But from our perspective, that will be the time where we will be highlighting all of these discussions around anything that's new, anything existing, anything that is potentially being taken by the department subject to the Minister's views on a derogation, for example, or an option that the Minister may have to make within that. But this SR today is simply around assuring us of our ability to be able to enforce IRM and take action where there is non-compliance with the obligations placed on farmers, which were the same in 2020, 2021, and are the same today, but because of that intervening period, because our old legislation was created in a way that referred to all this old legislation, all these old EU regulations that are now gone. That's the issue that we have, and that's why this needs to come today. And I take your point, but anything that's new as a result of the animal health law that we need to put into domestic statute, we'll be coming back to you in the autumn.
John.
Chair, I understand and respect that the views of some in the EU are different than mine, including your own views, and I genuinely do respect that. However, because of confusion or uncertainty that arose on a previous occasion, I had to seek clarification about issues that were sent or not sent officially to the Minister. I will be asking for summary today of the issues that we're raising in relation to this, if we are raising issues. And I'm going to make an appeal, which I hope is recorded, that any requests sent to the Minister on this occasion or any other occasion should not be out with his responsibilities. The Minister cannot single-handedly change the arrangements around EU or Windsor Framework or anyone else, just the same as no one else in this room can. What we can do is work with him and other ministers, irrespective of the different views, to try to seek new arrangements and solutions where there are problems, and that's a separate political issue, as is the Windsor Framework arrangement. So we need to be clear that to object to something because of an arrangement that is out with the Minister's control is really something that he could not answer. Whatever concerns we express, and he certainly can't change. If there are other animal health and enforcement concerns, and I would be keen if this does progress given some of the stats I've seen today and the clear gap that exists in legislation and regulation currently, I couldn't do anything other than support this at this stage. But if there are other concerns, then we need to list them and we need to be specific so that we know when the replies come back, if they come back, that they relate to our concerns raised and that there are not new concerns at a later stage that were never addressed in the first place.
I think I respect everything you've said, John. We have Hansard here today who are recording everything that's said, to be fair, so there will be a verbatim record of everything that's said. I think that's a fair point that you've made in terms of any request that we would have of the department and the minister have to be within the varies. But the reality is there are varies that do not exist at the moment because future divergences is as a result of the Windsor Framework, there's no doubt. The minister has no control of that, but we as legislators have every right to pursue those and to try and mitigate them. And the other thing is, from my perspective, from DEFRA's ambition, this is the bit that I would like to get to, that I would like to see this Labour government pursue an agenda where that divergence is diminished and not extended. I mean, we all have a fist in this fight. Unfortunately for us, in this legislature, we're voiceless because we don't have a say in this. So, in regard to that, This is by Hansard. We can sit here and do a list if you like, John. I don't mind if members want to raise certainly the last points that I made in and around the wider context, because I think we all would agree that animal welfare and the pursuance of the ability for our own department to pursue non-compliance and issues relating to is well made. I don't think there's anybody who would argue with that. Yeah, and that. There's another context here probably, which is the piece that I would like to just put on the record that I've alluded to towards the end. I'm just going to ask if members have any short pieces to add to this. We're not taking a vote on the committee's position on the SR because the last question I'm going to ask you guys is there a date in mind that the Minister has put in the diary to lay the SR with the Business Office?
The Minister asked for the legislation to be made as quickly as possible. I think it was in the recommendation, Darren, after the session, if the committee indicated that they were in agreement with the requirement for this. So we would seek to make and lay it tomorrow. The reason being, Chair, is that because we have had this discussion today, it will have become apparent that there is a question of legal risk over the enforcement powers that we are using and continue to use, and need for food security and the supply chain on our farm to fork regime. So that is why we were intending to make and lay it tomorrow, and also to highlight to the examiner any rationale as to why that would be the case. But that's the reason why. So that's what we were intending to do with the Minister's permission.
And unless members are going to tell me any different, I can't say with any certainty that the committee has agreed. And it's not unanimous. Unless anybody's telling me any different, I just want to make sure that I'm not putting my foot somewhere it's not supposed to be. The committee's not unanimous. Tom and William in particular, I think, would be...
Yeah. Chair, I did hear during the course of the discussions today one of the members here speak that they were going to be meeting with the Ulster Farmers Union tomorrow on this issue. Now, it would be good for us to get what the view of the Ulster Farmers Union or NIAPA or any of these folk is on this particular issue. And why wait until tomorrow to meet the Ulster Farmers Union and not before then? But for us as a committee then, surely it would be good if we had where the Ulster Farmers Union stand on this, where NIAPA stands on this issue. It'd be good to have that information as well.
I think, Tom, the reason that we were meeting tomorrow is because we're obviously committee first and give an overview, and the only reason we're meeting the Ulster Farmers Union is to tell them that there is no change to any farmers as a result of this. It just means that the enforcement that we were taking over this past 2.5 years is now being called into question. Now it's public, and that obviously asking for their encouragement that they would make sure that members, as much as possible, ensure that obligations and IRM requirements are met, and to reassure them that the actions that we took were proportionate to try and continue to ensure food safety and supply. That's why we're meeting them tomorrow. To discuss that on NIAPA. It's because having this conversation today, they wouldn't be aware of the legal question over the enforcement that we have had, and we want to assure them that we were doing the right thing, and that they would support the department in terms of trying to continue with the restrictions that are already in place.
And that Patsy's just indicated as well.
Sure, just to support the move to, well, it's unfortunate that for whatever reason it has lapsed since 2021 for whatever direction or reason that was, but I'm sure the industry would want to send a very clear message out about what our food is like, and that the measures are properly being taken to ensure that there's a good product coming from Northern Ireland here. That's uppermost in my mind, and the proper measures have been taken by the department to ensure that. For whatever reason, the legislation has lapsed.
I agree, Patsy. Thank you.
Members, again, as I said, it's having me, the committee would be agreeing this, but I'm just going to put the question there: do members want to take a formal position on it at this stage, or do they want to wait until the Minister has led the SR, and perhaps I'm sure we will hear from stakeholders after this meeting anyway, because there will be people interested, and I'm sure will be pursuing us.
We're just uncomfortable not with any enforcement, because I'm on for dealing with those that don't obey the rules. I have no issue with that, but there is issues around Europe that we have concerns, European input into this that we have concerns about, and we probably want to discuss it further.
Okay. So, then we will, if you're content, you certainly the indication from the committee, as evidenced by Hansard, will be that the committee was not unanimous in its support. There is some support and there are some concerns raised. The committee is, I'm sure, supportive of the regime being re-established, but that being the case, I think when your discussions with the UFU and any other stakeholders and the SR is made, then the committee will revisit it and take a
Thank you, Robert, for letting me in. Chair, I just want to maybe clarify the department. Does the view of the committee impede the implementation of this or delay it in any way?
I think we'll need to discuss that with the Minister around that. I think this is now, obviously in public session around the ongoing lack of legal certainty over our powers. We have a range of restrictions on individuals today because they are not compliant, and there is probably a concern rising now because of that. So, I think there is a need to reinstate the powers as soon as possible, and also bear in mind that if we don't do this, we're under legal obligation to apply EU obligations in Northern Ireland. We always have been. So I would need to take advice on that. But I would suggest that at this juncture, given the fact that we have a legal obligation to support EU legislation in Northern Ireland, but that aside, the enforcement powers issue, I need to take the Minister's mind on it, obviously, in terms of what he would intend to do. But and I would need to do that before I would give any answers.
It's just that I think it's without any vote being taken, it's obvious that the majority of the committee does favour the implementation this year, and certainly if I thought that the view of the committee would impede this and delay that regime that was so important to protect our agri-food industry, then I wouldn't. I actually would be wanting to vote if I thought that our position would impede the delay that in any way.
I agree, Chair. I don't need to speak again. It's been said.
Well, but it's been from 2001 to now. They've waited a long time to come here, so it hasn't been that big an issue.
It wasn't public at that time.
It's a pretty big issue. It's a pretty big issue in terms of the food security.
It was a big enough issue that should have been.
For some of us anyway.
Yeah, there's no doubt that we're in public session today. The game has changed. There's a realisation that there is a risk there. There's also a risk because of future divergence because of the Windsor framework, and however, that's not within our control. I'm now minded to have a proposal from the Deputy Chair to take a formal vote on the ASR, and it's been seconded by ISL1, sorry, draft SL1. So I will take a vote on the SL1. So, members, are you content that the Minister takes forward the ASR as proposed by the Minister and as evidenced by the Department officials today?
Yeah.
We have an indication online. Nicola, Anya, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And those against?
We abstain on this issue.
All right.
Okay, well, there's a clear majority.
Well, 5.
Well, I'm not sure about Anya. I haven't got an indication. So if we could get an indication from, yep, we've got a hand up. Okay, we'll check in the standing orders, Anya, but I think that's a vote. Okay. So you now have a formal position from the committee. 5 votes for and 3 abstentions.
3 abstentions, Chair.
I'll abstain.
3.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Members, could we take a very, very short comfort break, because that was an intense session. Thank you very much.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21. Sound.
Yeah, 5.
Okay, thank you. So we're now moving to agenda item 6, which is the oral briefing from the Department on the SL1, the Waste Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. I refer members to pages 46 to 58 of the pack for this item. That is the SL1, the Waste Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2025. Members, the Department intends to make a statutory rule to bring into effect the annual uplift to the Northern Ireland Environmental Agency Waste Charging Scheme for 24-25. Members, the rule will be laid before the Assembly under the draft affirmative resolution procedure, and it's anticipated that will come into operation in January 2025 or as soon as possible hereafter. This agenda item is being recorded via Hansard. Members, in line with the polluter pays principle and the principles of managing public money in Northern Ireland, MPMNI, the NIEA recovers 100% of its costs in relation to its functions as the regulator of waste activities in Northern Ireland, largely through fees and charges. The proposed SR amends the relevant regulations to give effect to these specific charges by uplifting the relevant fees and charges. As the increase in fees for 24-25 is higher than the standard inflationary measure, therefore the regulations are to be led by the draft affirmative procedure, and I am sure that the officials will explain that in the briefing. So members, I'm going to welcome the following officials to brief the committee and answer any questions after the briefing. We have Mr Colin Breen, the Assistant Director of ERPD, and Mrs Carmel McDowell, who is the Head of Branch Waste Legislation, I believe. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much, and if you would like to start with your briefing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to come here today and provide you with a short summary of the information contained in your briefing pack relating to the proposed Waste Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025. The Northern Ireland Environment Agency, hereafter referred to as NIEA, operate an annual charging policy for the regulatory activities. The charging policy covers 8 separate charging schemes, of which the Waste Management Charging Scheme is one, and the Waste Management Charging Scheme requires legislation to be laid to make it operational. The NIA charging policy is governed by the principles of managing public money in Northern Ireland and operates under a full cost recovery model. This means that the agency charges operators of regulated activities the full cost of those regulatory activities, and that they are not subsidised by the taxpayer. The fees and charges covered by the charging policy are uplifted annually. They are normally uplifted by the GDP deflator figure issued by Treasury in December each year. However, the policy allows for the Department to apply any other mechanism as deemed appropriate to ensure the maintenance of full cost recovery, thus preventing any departmental losses. After analysis by the NIA Finance Branch, it was agreed that the fees and charges for 24-25 should be uplifted by 9.5%. This covers 2 separate and distinct payroll years with different rates applied and includes associated employer pay costs. And this uplift applies to the schemes in the NIA charging policy for 24-25. Had the agency used the 24-25 GDP deflator figure of 0.8% as issued by Treasury, the agency would have lost an estimated 1 million in fees and charges across all the charging schemes, and this would have had to be paid by the public purse. Normally, the statutory rule required to bring the Waste Management Charging Scheme into operation each year is laid by negative resolution. However, these regulations are made under Schedule 4 of the EU Withdrawal Act 2018, which stipulates that the regulations will be subject to the draft affirmative resolution procedure unless they are only altering a fee or charge to reflect the changes in the value of money. Therefore, because the fees and charges are being uplifted by using a figure that is not a standard inflationary measure, the Waste Fees and Charges Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2025 are required to be laid by draft affirmative resolution. So, if you have any questions, Colin and I will be happy to answer where possible.
Thank you so much for the papers and the presentation. Can I ask just a couple of short questions, if that's okay? Obviously, this is because it's draft affirmative. It gives us another chance to discuss this. And what is the comparator fees and fines in the rest of the UK at the moment for the comparative years?
I don't know fully, but I understand that the guidance which insists on full cost recovery is statutory and applies throughout the UK, so they will be under the same obligation to apply full costs.
And not that this relates to the piece of legislation we have here, are other agencies in other jurisdictions also based on cost recovery for the running costs, as has been alluded to at the start here? So it's the same model of cost recovery for NIEA, or the similar body in each of the jurisdictions. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions for the department in regard to this? No. Sorry? No? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. You'll probably never get a shorter session than that.
Carmel, thank you.
Going, no, that's it. Okay.
Thank you. So just checking online. No, Nicola hasn't indicated either. No, we're good then. Okay. Members, as the procedure is draft affirmative, there will of course be the debate in plenary. And if there are no other comments to make, are you content that the committee supports the SR as drafted in that debate? Yep. Thank you very much, members, and thank you very much for your presentation today and your time. Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, members.
Thing we're not doing.
Just
read that.
Yeah. Agenda item 7, Agricultural Bill Briefing from the Motion Producer Organisation. Members, this agenda item was included in the pack as we had hoped at that point that the Motion Producer Organisation would be able to bring its briefing forward and take a slot that was previously occupied by the UFU. Unfortunately, that was not possible due to short notice, I suppose. So I will now move on to agenda item 8. Okay, agenda item 8 on the agricultural bill in reference to the clerk's memo. Members, I refer you to pages 19 to 20 of the table papers for a draft committee press release concerning the committee's call for views on citizen space. Are members content that it is... my computer's frozen again. Okay, are members content that it is published as shown in the papers? Yeah. Yep. Thank you, members. Members, I refer you to pages 21 to 25 of the table papers for the clerk's memo, summarising the queries highlighted in the raised bill research paper and discussed by members at our meeting last week. It may be useful to forward this memo in full or in part to the departmental bill teams for a response, as that will assist the committee with questions for witnesses and assist us for the deliberation stage. Members, are you agreed? Or are there any queries covered in the memo that you want to see amendments to? Members agreed? Thank you. Members, I also refer you to the raised bill research paper, the agriculture bill and explanatory and financial memorandum, pages 26 to 93 of the table papers. These papers will be included in a pack for information for each meeting we consider with the bill. And my thanks on behalf of the committee to Mark for the session last week and the raised paper and the queries that were raised. I thought it was incredibly useful. Members, agenda item 9 is the departmental written briefing. The department response to the consultation on amending legislation and the introduction of a code of practice for materials facilities in Northern Ireland. I'm going to refer you to pages 61 to 124 of the pack to the department written briefing, the department response to the consultation on amending legislation and the introduction of a code of practice for the materials facilities in Northern Ireland. Members, at our meeting on the 12th of September, the committee considered and noted the consultation on draft legislation and a draft code of practice for material facilities in Northern Ireland. The department is now intending to publish a response to the consultation on the amending legislation and code of practice for MF sites in Northern Ireland and have provided the committee with this written briefing on the results of that public consultation. The consultation was launched on 16th of September 24 and invited feedback from stakeholders on areas such as the draft legislation and the draft code. Members, DAERA states that Northern Ireland legislation and sampling processes in this regard are currently behind that of England, Scotland and Wales. Aligning through the code will provide UK parity. Legislation is required to implement the code in Northern Ireland. Specifically, it is intended to amend the Waste Management Licensing Regulations, Northern Ireland 2003, and the Pollution Prevention and Control of Industrial Emissions Regulations, Northern Ireland 2013, which is to define an MF and a place on an obligation of any MF who holds a waste licence or permit to comply with the code. Members, the written briefing highlighting that the SR will be made using the negative procedure, the draft SR, the Materials Facilities Code Northern Ireland Regulations 2025, has been consulted upon and is attached for reference at Annex C in your papers. Therefore, to establish parity with the rest of the UK in relation to sampling of material facilities, the Department will publish the departmental response to the consultation, which is Annex A of your papers. They will lay the legislation, the Materials Facilities Code, Northern Ireland Regulations 2025, which is Annex C. They will publish the Code of Practice for Material Facility Sites in Northern Ireland on the DAERA website, which is Annex B of your papers, and publish guidance on the DAERA website before the code goes live on the 1st of April 2025. The members have any comments, or are you content to note? And we will request an oral briefing from officials when the SL1 is before us. Members content? Thank you, members. Okay, agenda item 10, which is correspondence. Members, I refer you to correspondence from the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny Committee, dated the 10th of January at page 126 of the pack, regarding the proposed EU regulation regarding strengthening the position of farmers in the food supply chain. You will recall that our meeting last week, we considered a response from DEFRA dated the 14th of January, advising the committee that the UK Government are considering similar matters through a series of sectoral reviews and are consulting with the devolved governments. On the 2nd of January 25, the DSC, the Democratic Scrutiny Committee, was notified by the UK Government in relation to the proposal to amend a series of existing EU regulations related to the Common Agricultural Policy, including one EU Act, and that is the Regulation EU 1308-2013, which is relevant to the work of the Democratic Scrutiny Committee. At its meeting on the 9th of January, that committee noted that the wider impact of this proposed EU Act, beyond the specific focus of DSE, may be of interest to the work of our committee. Members, any comments to make at this stage? Are you content to note? And we will return to that as it develops. Thank you, members. I refer you to an invitation at page 127 of the pack from the Safeguarding Board for Northern Ireland to a conference entitled A System to Support Our People Embedding a Trauma-Informed Approach. This was issued to you by email earlier this week, so I'm just noting it for record. The conference is taking place at the Stormont Hotel today from 9:30 and doesn't finish until 3 p.m. Are you content to note? And after the committee, obviously, you're free to attend. Members, I refer you to correspondence from Paul Crawford of the Northern Ireland Sheep Scab Group, dated the 12th of December, and to the report, A Study of Sheep Scab in Northern Ireland, including detection and identifying barriers to control, at pages 128 to 137 of the pack. Members, I think it is worth highlighting some of the findings for the record. Sheep scab is a notifiable disease in Northern Ireland and is caused by an allergic reaction to fecal antigen produced by a highly infectious surface living mite. Mr Crawford has undertaken a one-year research pilot project with an aim to gather evidence about the disease in Northern Ireland and barriers to its better control, and also to inform future control programmes. He states that the industry is seeing the disease in flocks more frequently than in the past, and that the various agencies were not acting to control it. Members, in the report, scab was identified across Northern Ireland with heavy infestations in some areas, and the report states that if not dealt with in a coordinated manner, it would continue. Evidence was found that some of the limited number of treatments authorised for the condition were failing to cure scab in some flocks. The research revealed that farmers were appreciative of the one-year programme and called for a national version, and showed a willingness to part-fund such work alongside state support. Members, Mr Crawford believes that Northern Ireland sheep and farmers have been left behind, and highlights the national programme in Wales, funded in part by the Welsh Assembly, alongside farmer contributions. It is now in its second year, and hundreds of thousands of sheep have been treated. In England and Scotland, major regional programmes have been undertaken or are ongoing. Members, he asserts that the sheep industry in Northern Ireland is ready to step up as they have to take the scab control forward, but it requires political intervention. Mr Crawford states that the sheep scab order will also need updating, and ongoing support from DAERA would also be required to trace animal movements, so that action could be taken where an outbreak is detected. And finally, he states that to enhance environmental protection, systems to facilitate disposal of sheep dip would be advantageous, as currently authorisations to dispose of dip can take months to be processed. Members, Mr Crawford is happy to brief the committee. Do members have any comments? Do you wish to arrange a briefing with Mr Crawford, or forward this letter and his research to the department for a response first? Members, any particular views?
I think that would be very useful. I've met him in the past, a couple of years ago, and found him very informative.
Yep. Okay. Are we content then to arrange a meeting in our forward work plan, and then at that stage we will forward a response to the department, having taken further discussions face to face? Okay. Yep. Thank you, members. I really appreciate that. Okay, members. Item 9.4, refer you to an invitation at pages 138 to 139 of the pack from the Dairy Council of Northern Ireland to a conference entitled Dairy Shaping the Future. Further details of the conference can be found at page 104 of the tabled papers. The conference takes place on the 5th of February at the Denadri in Antrim. Unfortunately, I can't attend. I have dairy commitments, but if members of the committee are thereabouts.
Southampton,
John, I think, yes. Hopefully, I would love to have went to it actually, but I just can't. So my apologies have been sent, and anybody, please do take up the opportunity. Members, I refer you to correspondence received from the Canine Breeders Northern Ireland, CBNI, dated the 14th of January at pages 140 to 141 of the pack, regarding the Minister's recent announcement in December on animal welfare reforms. CBNI is an industry body representing dog breeders and state that they are proud of their leadership in improving dog welfare and fully support better enforcement against and the ending of unlicensed dog breeding facilities. They expressed concern that the CBNI was not included in the consultation process to date, despite assurances from the Department. They assert that as their members are fully compliant and regulated, CBNI are primary stakeholders in any legislation involving dog breeding. They state it is important that the public have the opportunity to source a pet from licensed, regulated breeders, otherwise dog breeding will go further underground. They have requested to be formally included within any further working groups or stakeholder groups and asked for the committee's assistance in that regard. Members, have you any comments to make, or are you content to write to the Department in support of the CBNI being included as a formal stakeholder by DAERA going forward, and to query the rationale for the seeming oversight to date? Is that fair enough? Yeah, it may just be an oversight. Okay, thank you. 9.6, members, I refer you to a clerk's memo from the clerk to the Committee for Finance dated the 17th of January at pages 142 to 144 of the pack, and copies of draft budget 25-26 fact sheet and the budget improvement plan roadmap at pages 145 to 154 of the pack. This is in relation to the draft executive budget for 25 to 26 and the budget sustainability plan. Members, the fact sheet and plan will be helpful to the committee when we get a further briefing from officials on the draft 25-26 budget. At its meeting on the 15th of January, the Committee for Finance received a briefing on the draft executive budget 25-26, which is currently out for consultation until the 13th of March, as well as further briefing on the executive budget sustainability plan, which was published in October 24. It was agreed that it should be brought to the attention of other committees and members can read at their leisure. Members, the briefing focused on the draft executive budget 25-26 and the budget sustainability plan. Regarding the draft executive budget of 25-26, DOF officials described the budget situation facing the executive in 25-26 as incredibly challenging, and it does not meet the bids made by the departments. Officials also stated that they do not expect the 25-26 financial year to provide the unprecedented level of Barnett consequentials seen in 24-25, and the briefing highlighted there was a certain reliance on the part of departments during 24-25 to manage in-year budget pressures through these Barnett consequentials. Members, on the positive side, officials indicated that much of what was gained through these Barnett consequences was baselined into the 25-26 budget. However, they cautioned that this was not something that could be banked on going forward. Officials expect the UK Government will make a comprehensive spending review announcement in mid-June, providing 3 years of resource budgeting starting in 26-27 with capital budgeting for 4 years. Officials indicated that this would provide the basis for a multi-year executive budget 26-27, which would run until 28-29. Whilst I would absolutely love to see it, I won't be holding my breath, but I'm sure members here would be unanimous in hoping that that happens. Members, the budget sustainability plan covers the following elements: the process to deliver a balanced budget in 24-25, the process to deliver a balanced budget following completion of the next spending review, an assessment of the existing in-year monitoring process with consideration given to the Fiscal Council's improving transparency of in-year monitoring publication, an assessment on the sustainability of funding of executive policies, an assessment of how the executive will raise at least 113 million in additional income from 25-26, and how budget management tools could be used to deliver a balanced budget. Officials have indicated that the £113 million of additional income has been achieved and is likely to reach around £140 million following planned rises in the regional rate of 5% for domestic rates and 3% for non-domestic rates. Members, as part of the Budget Improvement Plan roadmap, the Executive will seek to link Programme for Government priorities to the budget 25-26. Officials indicated that the departments are working on the production of 5-year business plans to represent a baseline picture of departmental strategy and budgeting. Officials hope that the plans will be accompanied by rough high-level budgeting. Members, have you any comments, or are you content to note this information from the Department of Finance and to pursue further with DAERA officials in due course?
I'll be to know.
Thank you, members. Members, I refer you to correspondence dated the 20th of January received from David Burley of Fish and Tackle and Bait Limited, page 95 of the table papers. Mr Burley has expressed disappointment at the decision to cut overtime support for the Erne Pike Classic and the Classic Fishing Festival in Fermanagh, and is calling for the decision to be reconsidered. Mr Burley believes that the events are highlights of the angling calendar, also vital to the economy and cultural identity of the region. Mr Burley wrote to the committee previously seeking support for additional overtime for industrial staff who helped to implement the events. After consideration of his letter at our meeting on the 12th of September, the committee did write to the department encouraging it to support these events with the necessary DAERA staff. Have members any comments to make or wish to write in support of the matter? I know that the matter was raised in member statements this week as well. Yes. Has anybody any comments to make on that? Are we content that the committee...
Is Anya there? Would give.
Anya's not on, I don't think.
I'm sure he's written to everybody this matter.
Yes, there's a couple of... There's another gentleman
who's referred to them. He's made his point and made it well. So I would support any endeavours to raise this with the department.
Yeah.
That's
enough, yeah.
Yeah,
okay. So the...
Chair, if we are applying to it, might be worth noting that you'll recall that we had a request from Fermanagh and Omagh Council for a meeting, which is around agri and rural issues, understandably, from the relevant committee there, but I had also requested that meeting to be extended to include matters around the public angling estate, the Erne.
Yes, that's right.
And for information, both Upper and Lower Lough Erne are part of the public, in their entirety, are part of the DAERA public angling estate, so that's worth noting.
Excellent, no, thank you, John. You're very, I'm not saying you're not useful in all parts of the debate, but in these ones in particular, you do have a particular set of skills, as Liam Neeson would say, you know.
Okay. We will hopefully be discussing that with...
Brilliant. Thank you very much, members. Appreciate that. I refer you to the Clerk's memo dated the 17th of January from the Clerk of the Public Accounts Committee at pages 96 to 97 of the table papers, and the PAC Traffic Light System Report at pages 98 to 99 of the table papers. Members, at its meeting on the 16th of January 2025, the PAC reviewed its primacy over the NIAO reports published up to the 31st of December 2024. As a result of this, the committee has provisionally agreed its 8th inquiry will be on managing the school's estate. I wish them the best of luck with that. Furthermore, the PAC will retain primacy on a number of recently published reports pending further consideration of these topics, and details are included in the Traffic Light System Report. The PAC agreed to release the Water Quality in Lakes and Rivers report, and as it no longer holds primacy over this report, it suggests that the committee may wish to consider it as part of its programme of work. And this is certainly something in my time in the committee we have visited a number of times. Have any comments to make, and are you content to note? Thank you, members. Okay. Members, I refer you to correspondence dated the 20th of January, pages 100 to 102 of the table papers from Valerie Hodges, the Chair of the Ulster Beekeepers Association, UBKA, regarding the demise of the DAERA Bee Inspector Service. Members, the UBKA seeks to alert the committee to a serious decline in the Bee Inspector Service provided by DAERA, which they state, if not addressed urgently, will have a major impact on beekeeping in Northern Ireland, with impacts on agricultural and horticultural industries. The letter states that since December, the DAERA Bee Inspector Service now has no dedicated and trained bee inspectors in post. The Bee Inspection Service plays an important role in inspecting hives with suspected diseases such as European or American foul brood, both of which are notifiable diseases, and leading the work in containing an outbreak. Members, they state that the issue has been developing over a period of time, which extends to more than 2 years, and the association has corresponded with DAERA urging early action ahead of a potential decline in service, but sadly to no effect. The letter also notes that the bee inspectors are an important part of the NIEA's contingency planning to address any incursion of Asian hornets into Northern Ireland. They refer to a loss of bee inspectors in 2009 in Scotland, which was accompanied by a serious outbreak of European foul brood in Tayside and Fife. This was then dealt with by a Scottish revitalisation of its bee inspectorate, with some 10 bee inspectors now supporting beekeepers in Scotland. They also state that the UBKA has informed DAERA that it is willing to work with it to manage the risks in the short term, but that a properly resourced bay inspection service is vital. Mrs Hodges has indicated that the association would be pleased to brief the committee on this matter. Have members any comments to make, or do you wish to schedule a briefing as soon as work allows? Yep, content. And just to let you know, there is honey available in the shop at Stormont. Other brands of honey are available in other shops, but we do have bees in Stormont, and we do need to look after them. 9.10, members, I refer you to correspondence from Mr McCann dated the 21st of January, pages 103 of the table papers, regarding a complaint of dog mess in his local area. The correspondence highlights the dangers that dog mess pose to children, as it can contain roundworm eggs, which can cause stomach upset, sore throats, asthma, and in rare cases blindness. He has asked what action can the Minister take to address this problem, as he states that small signage and random patrols are not working. I believe it is local councils members who are responsible for enforcement in this regard. I propose we forward this correspondence to the Committee for Communities and also to Solace ANI. And we could, as a courtesy, send it to the Minister, but it's out with his varies, if that's okay. Okay, thank you, members. Agenda item 11, the forward work plan, members. A draft forward work programme can be found in the table papers at pages 104 to 106. Do members have any comments, or you agreed that it is published?
Enough,
Yep. Thank you, members. Agenda item 12, any other business? Does anyone have any other business that they want the committee to deal with?
Nope.
Nope. Members, the date and time of the next meeting. Our next meeting is on Thursday the 30th of January 2025 in Parliament Buildings at 10 a.m. Thank you, members.
Committee Room 21. Sound. 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 Committee Room 21.